This is English Channel.
So, それではお時間となりましたのでスタートさせていた
We
だ
would
きま
like to
す。
start the next session. At ACK Talks 2025, we will host 9 talk sessions based on the theme 2050, A Vision Towards the Future, with the aim of enhancing our conference function and building a community centered on culture and the arts. We will explore new perspectives and values for the years ahead. Together with leading figures in modern art, we will reflect on new values for the future through discussions on themes such as art and everyday life, reinterpreting culture and sustainability, and the relationship between humans and technology.
売らせるためのトークプログラムを展開しています。ここから
So next, we welcome Martin Germann and Kokoro Kimura, curators of the ACK 2025 public program, which centers on the themes of symbiosis. Joining them are exhibiting artist Stella Zhong and Tirtadji, director of ROH, one of Indonesia's leading emerging galleries. Together, they will speak under the theme Collaborative Intelligence, Shared Realism for a Symbiotic Society.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Martin Germann, and I'm very happy to be here on stage with these distinguished friends and colleagues. And Coco and me, we were this year supposed to organize the so-called public program of this little art fair. And public program means to invite artists who interfere between the fair architecture, who show works which are maybe not so fittingly in the booths themselves of all the galleries. And of course, you have to think about a theme, how you approach a job like that. And the first thing we thought about is, where are we here actually? Because this is a very important question. Where are we here? And we are, maybe we can put the next image. The next. Okay. In fact, we are here at the ICC, the Kyoto Conference Center, which is a pretty much well-known metabolist architecture, which was built in the 60s. And as you know, metabolism as a typical Japanese architectural movement was a fusion of biology and technology. And this, say, in the West, we call it brutalist quite often. This movement somehow went to end in the 70s because the so-called limits of growth became clearer and clearer. And so this situation, let's say, didn't really change. But then at the same time, this ICC was also the place where the very, very famous Kyoto Protocol has been decided about in 1997. And in 2005, it was enforced and went into action. And we thought, maybe 20 years later, we are in the situation that the ecological problems are just getting more and more dramatic. And you can also see that in this an enormous amount of ecology-related exhibitions we can see all around the world. And we thought we do maybe a program like that, but in a slightly different way. What do we mean with a different way? We think that instead of browsing around through all the themes surrounding art, we look into what is actually an artwork. And we think, such as Timothy Norton once says, a philosopher, an artwork is ecological as such, because everything we demand these days to coexist in a more symbiotic manner, to find more symbiotic relationships with each other on a planetary level, we think that all this is actually embedded in artworks, because artworks consists of different ideas, motivations, of materials, of visitors, of you, of tradition, and often if an artwork wants to create something like innovation, it needs to also bring together contradictory elements. And what we wanted to do with our public program is in a way to liberate let's say, the world from the catastrophe exhibitions on the one hand, and to pose that art itself is something very ecological, and Timothy, or the artworks themselves. And Timothy Norton said, to quote him briefly, a sculpture doesn't just represent ecological themes. It is ecological through its material existence, its decay over time, its interactions with air and light. Aesthetic experience is also an ecological awareness. And so we think looking into art and how art is produced is a very interesting way to look at it. So we have a very broad frame of the Kyoto Protocol, of the metabolist architecture, and then at the same time we look into what artworks are actually capable to do, what they are capable to connect. And maybe we can go through the parcours briefly of the public program we put together before we have then a small in-depth talk with Stella Zhong, who is one of the amazing contributors to our public program. And then later on, Jun, who is together with Chapter Gallery, representing Stella, will talk a little bit about how actually this side of our panel, the gallery side, is actually trying to create a new network, especially in Southeast Asia. So we have quite a parcours to go, and I would think let's go briefly through the artworks. Maybe Coco wants to start?
So you already walked through the entrance, and the first thing you might see is the gold leaf, like a triangle, and put on the surface of the concrete of ICC Kyoto. And then this triangle is really fascinating, and then because the surface itself is, as he said, is brutalist in a way, but on the surface, Daniel really meticulously put gold leaf. And then the shape of triangle is actually the symbol of both culture and nature. So in a way, what artists do is more like an intervention into culture and nature more than creation from like a material itself.
And the triangle is, of course, a basic form. It's a mathematical form on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's also an ancient form, which you find, for example, in Balinese culture. You found it in South America, and it's a very basic form of connection. And since this whole ACK is about collaboration and connection, we thought this is a quite beautiful work to start our public program with. It's a little bit like a tattoo on the building, but a softly applied tattoo, which is shimmering light. The second artist is then an artist from Vietnam originally, but she grew up in Germany, in Essen, and she's bringing a bit of a spiritual dimension in the start of the public program. Maybe you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I really think her work is quite like a dramatology, you know? I can see, like, for example, the story come from her background as a first generation as German citizen, but her parents moved from Vietnam. And then also she's a daughter and mother, that kind of personal stories elaborated into this, like a stage, I can say. And then, yeah, this wooden part is like the interpretation of like a mutable.
I think it's a little shrine.
Yeah, shrine, yeah. And then fork, I like the combination and really welcoming the visitors.
It's called replacement parts in the translation, and the artist made that out of leftover material. So it's a constant metabolism of using material and then sawing something and building it together new. And it also has an oddly humorous dimension because, of course, the fog is just, it's shine, and it's a little bit cheap in a way. But it's nice for a welcoming moment. Then the third artist in the public program, this is a work by the artist in the booth. You can see it as at Misako Rosen, so there's a relation between these two works. The first is the first in the series, and this is the second one, as far as I understood. The third artist is a pretty well-known person, and we have one visible and one rather invisible part in this public program. It's Rit Tiravanija, and last year, the artist Lee Kit had such a fantastic intervention in the Stone Garden that we thought we have to leave it almost empty this year. And so Rikrit was just putting something which looks like a thrown-away coffee cup in the Stone Garden. But it's basically made of lead, so it's very heavy material. So it's material transformation. And of course, no one in Japan would throw away a coffee cup in a Stone Garden. And then you can read on the coffee cup, written in Japanese language, is this all, what was it? Is this all is this all what there is to life? And so for us, in this very beginning of the fair, we thought instead of pitching it up, we are pitching all a little bit down, that people have to look and to find a little bit and to search and to also ask themselves a question. Where are we going to? We are going to an art fair. What are we going to do here? What are we going to expect? And Rikrit is very well known for his collaborative works, of course. And as far as I understand, there are also tea ceremonies which he's doing somewhere else on this ground. And then we enter the building. And we suddenly, the public program is getting a little bit of a historical dimension because Kishio Suga is a very, very well-known monoha artist, which is monoha, this movement which combines arte povera and minimalism from the West, from the 70s on, in thinking about material, but also about perception, about landscape. And we have this piece here. Do you want to talk about it, or?
I can briefly say, because so what intriguing about his work is he starts from really looking at an object. What he's doing is, again, not a creation as artist. He really stares at the object itself, and he thinks that object, on the surface of the object, many meanings put. And then the artist really focus on the one specific meaning and make it really sharp, and it becomes an artwork. That kind of minimum intervention can be like really resonate with symbiosis our theme.
Yeah, and it's also a historical artist, and we combine him in the public program with a very young and upcoming artist. And the name of this artist is Stella Zhong. And here we have the same questions, basically, about inside, outside, perception, imagination, because this piece here, I think you made it during the pandemic, and we all remember sitting at home during the pandemic, time became very thick. Perception became very slow. And so I think this work here, which is called Yolk Velocities, what was made out of your apartment in New York, and you were observing the outside, and what we can see there, what looks like two suns, which is actually impossible from the Earth to see. It's basically just the light of your apartment mirrored from the inside. And so we thought this is a quite beautiful work, also thinking about the position of the artist as someone imagining, as someone reflecting, but also as someone taking his own time in doing something. And of course it also has an oddly humorous dimension when it's called Yolk Velocities, but maybe we talk later about this piece in particular, and also why the fabric is transparent, because you see it as an intervention in the architecture as far as I understood. But let's come later to that. The next piece is Yain Lee.
Yeah, so Yain Lee, she's a Korean artist now based in Vienna. And then there is one phrase really stuck on my mind, is that she said now human is already hybrid. That is a status we have, because we often think that human is human, quite fully organic. But in her way of thinking, we are already the hybrid of, for example, organic and inorganic in this quite technologically developed society. And then, online, offline, maybe if you try to connect to others online, maybe you lose the connection offline. That kind of contradiction always forming our life. So I really think that her works and way of thinking is really the representation of this contemporary society.
And what material are they made of?
It's the debris of from industrial debris, and also the mixture of more organic materials like dried flour. So that kind of combination is also fascinating, because I can see the dried flour is cut and it's a symbolization of life, for example, but at the same time it's already died. So that kind of contradiction really the core of the work.
Indeed. Next artist in the public program is Kyoto-based Yuki Kimura, and we are very happy that we could convince her to use the architecture of this building for her work, or for her two works basically. So it's consisting of two different works. The one is called Suntory Whiskey Kaku Hankaku, and it's a constellation of Suntory whiskey bottles, or it's various constellations actually. And the bottles, they have a surface, a glass surface, where you can see patterns. And one of her rules is that she tries to make as much different combinations of these bottles as possible. Also representing the patterns our life goes through, because we organize ourselves in patterns to communicate with each other. We invent rules, we try to speak or not to speak, and so on. And this work here, which demands a little bit of attention in case you want to go there later, she combined with a new piece, which is called Détresse. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about the second one?
Yeah. So this is a robot created in the collaboration with students and Kimura. And then this is already programmed how it moves. But because of the conditions, because of the environment, for example, the floor of ICC Kyoto, the control is getting lost. And then unexpected destination, the robot goes in the end. And as you said, patterns, because the Suntory Kaku, it's the inside liquid is half or full, only two patterns. And also it resonates with the robot move as well. It's already patterned. So it's, again, the combination of patterns, but, always including unexpectedness, and which we cannot control. So that kind of passive attitudes is also what we want to show in this program.
And of course, also speaking about outside, inside again, if you suddenly start to drink all the whiskey, your inside, outside appearance also changes upside down. And so that's also part of this work, I think, although it's not immediately outspoken. So you cannot see the algorithms by which this machine is moving, but you can see, but you see an outside, and you cannot see what the whiskey is doing inside. And so she's playing with these aspects. She's actually coming from photography, but went now more into this perceptual realms.
So it's more like visible and invisible. Like,
yeah. And after this is actually our high-tech work in our public program. We come to a kind of low-tech work, which is made by also Kyoto-based artist Masaomi Yasunaga. And he is an artist who studied with Sodesha, a ceramic movement, which in the 50s and 60s started to, or liberated ceramics from having a purpose or having a function, because they started to use ceramic as free objects, inspired by the West also. And he sees his work a little bit in the tradition of breaking up patterns, historical art tradition patterns, because the way how he's making these pieces, he's only sculpting with glaze. And this is very unique, so he invented this technology even in a way. And also the pedestal on which this work is shown, it's part of his studio equipment. It was just lying around there. And so that's Masaomi Yasunaga. Next artist is a little bit an answer to Kishio Suga, we could say, because Toshikatsu Endo, who participated in the Venice Biennial and Documenta 87, he was someone who wanted to do something new after Monoha. So he saw himself in a different tradition of bringing also narrative, universal narratives back into art, like people like Thomas Schütter or Anselm Kiefer in Germany. And his works consist of very, very basic forms. For example, this sphere, which is made out of massive wood and then burned. And of course, the burning process connects it with the ceramic piece we saw before. And also, this is a very site-resonant artwork in the way how he installed it there, because it looks, you all know the film 2001 by Stanley Kubrick, and so it's a bit of a Stanley Kubrick situation, as if this black burnt ball landed here in the midst of the ICC. We also have a ship and a circle, because the circle represents for the artist a basic human need, which is communicating with others, with getting together with others. And the last artist in our public program is actually Miho Dohi. She's a Japanese artist from Tokyo, or from close to Tokyo, and she works since very long time just on one series, and this series is called Butai. So she has a very rigid conceptual framework, just executing butai like Onkawara was executing dates. But on the other hand, this model gives her an absolute freedom to do whatever with material she wants. And butai, the term, is a combination of body and thing. And in that sense, it is a most basic, let's say, artistic activity that with your body and your mind, you try to form or shape a thing. And that's why we thought we put her and these and her anti-monumental objects at the end of this public program. So this is a little bit how we try to weave a thin and small anti-monumental line through this building. And now we come back to Stella. And actually, maybe we start first with this work here. Actually, you're more of a sculpture artist, but would you think that this piece here also relates to sculpture in a way? We will see some sculptures later.
Hi. First, I want to thank you for bringing this work here. It's a work that I really have forgotten since the pandemic. Yeah, yes and no, because I think I work so much with space. So anything I do, video or sculpture, has to do with working in a sort of relationship that's both very grounded and physical and also cosmic. And I appreciated how you started the talk by talking about the triangle work, because I was thinking about this video, which is 1 minute long only, and I shot in one go on my really old iPhone, just that one time, and never really intended it to be to become an artwork to be shown. But looking back at it now, I was thinking a lot about the sort of triangulation between infinity, which is at the horizon, that's never really reachable, and the window, the pane of glass that's right in front of us, and me. And this very rigid triangle. And when I was filming it, I was using my phone just tilting ever so slightly. Like if I tilt just a little bit too much, the suns will disappear. And so thinking about how this really cosmic relationship that's both extremely immense, but also extremely delicate, that can disappear anytime. Yeah. And also, I like thinking about this triangle also is one that is quite blurry because it's on the reflection of, this is reflection of lamps in my room. It's on a double plane of glass. And so that point of the triangle is really trying to separate into 2 points. And it's really becoming a sort of 4-point shape. And this idea of the 2 suns or multiple suns is something that runs across all of my work, and I'm still working with that now. And I just actually made a show recently at Row,
Which we will see.
yeah, which we'll see in a bit, titled Free Range Suns. And this idea of the multiple suns, I think in terms of thinking about the triangle, and how, I guess this has to do with like the larger question of my work, which really concerns, in a way, fundamental physics, and this idea that we are in a planet that revolves in a singular sun solar system, and everything that we are like today, like our economy, our social, political spheres, is the way it is today because we revolve around one sun. And I think that we'll all be really different if we spin around 2 suns or 3 suns, right? We will have a completely different type of economy and a different type of philosophy. And it's something that I want to like think about, obviously with no answers, but this is just a very kind of immediate, almost like discovery of that idea. Yeah.
And it's interesting because your work has this tendency to jump from macro to micro and connects also macro with micro. But I mean, still, unfortunately, we still have only one sun. And it seems that we still need to build buildings and to live somewhere. And I think we see here a first image of your really amazing show at Raw Projects, and which just opened in September, I guess, right?
Yeah, October.
And
yeah.
you told at some point, you told me that this new piece which you constructed for this exhibition for you also relates to growing up in Shenzhen, if I remember right. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
I'm not, yeah, it relates to my experience as someone who really lives in cities. particularly I think Shenzhen, obviously. But I think about buildings a lot because I think they're always built of certain ranges of scales that gives humans a very particular position to be in terms of power and meaning. And with this building that we built in the gallery, which is almost 6 meters tall, it's doing many things, but one of the things to like just maybe like to make sense, I wanted to bring the two suns into this space. And I think we all have the experience of walking in cities. Sometimes if you're in the right position, you would catch a very direct sun reflection, like right in your eyes. And that, like, I guess that is another moment of very hyper triangulation with you and the cosmic space. And I wanted to make this building not be able to do that because it has two suns reflection. And so you would always be caught in between two very close suns, but not in one or the other. And it's also a building that is not too big to be real, but also not small enough to be a model. And so standing next to it, it's quite an awkward place to be. I think, yeah, I don't know if I answer your questions, but yeah.
But why? What is the reason for the mirroring?
Because I wanted to. I think okay, it's many things again, but the mirror because I needed to create the sun reflection, and I also wanted this architecture to be both really cold and unapproachable, but also have the potential because in cities the architecture is often burned by the sun with its mirroring, and for it to have the potential to hold that heat also, which it doesn't really, but it's where I was thinking about.
To hold the economic heat, which is kind of somehow circulating inside and which also separates from the outside. Mm-hmm. But other works in this gallery show are also pieces like these, which you are, I think, became known for recently. And these are sculptures which which repeat this slightly oval form, which is a bit of a perpetual motif in your work. But I asked you this question earlier before. Does it relate to you in a way or not to abstraction as an idea? Using this basic form.
Yeah. Yes and no. I'm not sure. Because I think it's not abstracting from anything. This form is something that's developed over a long time. I guess not that long, because I haven't lived for that long. But over many years of me working, and the way I make sculpture, I think, is in a way a reflection of thinking about how matters are made. And I think a lot about how everything is made of the same building blocks. Everything is made out of atoms. The same atoms can make me and also can make this microphone or this floor. And so a lot of my sculpture is built with that idea in mind, that in this case, every sculpture is made out of different orientations of the same form. And this oval form is an egg pancake, but I won't explain it, but it's just a very Stella shape.
Stella shape.
It's just a me shape that's kind of squishy but also is substantial and in a way unbreakable. It's like a mochi. So different works are, I guess, configurations of this egg, which is the quantum of my world. So they build different things. And I think looking at this now, like from a distance, feels like looking in a microscope of little molecules, and you're not sure what they're doing. But they're
doing something.
They're doing something.
If I remember right, you were studying with Aki Sasamoto, who is a pretty well-known Japanese artist who has an exhibition now at the MOT.
Which is fantastic.
What did you learn from her?
To not give a fuck. It's the biggest thing I learned from her. But I think what I learned, or what I gained a lot of confidence from Aki maybe, is to be confident in linking very unrelated ideas together and see how they work, instead of trying to make sense. I think that's something that I knew that I always think like that, but you know, like growing up in schools and learning, you're always told to be reasonable. And I think Aki is quite unreasonable, which is very respectable. Yeah.
And it's also a feature of your pieces that they are really worked through, inside out. They have the same finish, so it's not just decor. Quite interesting but interesting what you said about Aki, and also what you said about the ambiguity of different ideas flowing into an artwork. This is exactly what we wanted to say with that art is ecological, basically. Do you have a question to Stella?
Yeah, I really noticed that, how to say, you know, I read something and you really into, for example, architecture, but then you want to be an artist because you don't want to make sense. You don't want to make some architecture really reasonable for people. And that kind of imagination beyond the framework limit our activity is something really through your practices that's so fascinating. Maybe like you can talk something about like food, how food related, because you really talk about urban or architecture, cosmology, or even like math. But I think for the specifically the video work, you mentioned that it's yoke, right? Yoke velocity. Maybe you can talk something about the title itself also, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, all of my work has to do with food, which I think is maybe related to what you guys are kind of thinking about the inside and the outside. And I always think about, and I forgot where I read it from one of the physicists, astrophysicists, and he talked about how we are always on the inside. There's nothing that's outside. We are completely, fully inside, always. And so I think the most inside thing that I can think about is here. And so everything I make and everything I think about, I want it to have the possibility of being ingested and digested, and it will come out. But even when it comes out, it's still within this universe. You know, none of us are gods, and so we're not ever looking at anything from the outside. So it's, I guess a little hint with titles and stuff that everything could be eaten, obviously in imagination, but have to put like their ability to be both objects that we can look at, but also to be digested.
So I think it's really interesting, like the subject-object relationship always changing, always flipping each other when I see your works. And if it's installation, maybe that kind of sense is more like a double, tripod, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you, yeah.
Yeah, maybe subject-object relationships are also artist-gallery relationships, or hopefully not. So how did you start to work with Stella? How did that come above?
Hi, Martin. I don't do a lot of talks like this, but for you and Stella, I thought we'd give it a crack. But I've been thinking first and foremost about this concept and idea of triangulation and where things start. And as gallerists, we get a chance to showcase our program and the practices of our artists in opportunities like Art Collaboration Kyoto. And ACK is a really special art fair in particular because you're quote unquote forced to collaborate. But in our case, in 2022, we sometimes also get a chance to see how our colleagues work with artists and present their works, and to also get a chance to be inspired by various presentations and artworks that they present. So I think it was in 2022, right, Stella? Although it feels like maybe a decade ago, that we saw this really weird looking painting that was sort of like rectangular in form and a little bit of a distorted image of sorts. I don't think it's there, but for your imagination, something that felt like it came from the past, but that equally could also be drawn from a far future, and though it was made in the recent past or near to the present, actually. And it was this body of work that was presented by Chapter New York, actually, in Paris International in 2022, I think, that we got a chance to first see Stella's work. And for some reason, that experience lingered. I didn't know too much more about what else her practice was really about, but the image of that painting just stuck in my brain like a Yoki thing, maybe. And through Nicole and through following thereafter Nicole's program with Chapter New York, as well as then getting the opportunity to do a studio visit through Nicole's introduction with Stella, when I got a chance to visit New York eventually, which was 2 Decembers ago now, if I understand correctly, that we then got a chance to speak more in depth with Stella. That was one of only 2 studio visits that I did during that trip. But again, like just similar to the feeling that I had with that painting, the first encounter and conversation that I had with Stella was just something that just stuck to my brain like yolk. And this then continued on very organically into an invitation for Stella to come and spend time with us in Indonesia, in a residency program that we were hosting in Bali, and eventually somehow developed and turned into that.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned the residency program, because it's a good link to that you could maybe speak a little bit about your gallery activities, which for me are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you operate from Indonesia, and I think your gallery has a form of generosity, which I really appreciate a lot. But of course, that's also it's also about work. And I have the feeling that you're slowly, also in the not post-documenta time, or maybe to avoid that theme, that you're really building up something new there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit how it started. How did it come above that you're doing raw projects now? And maybe you could speak about some projects which were really influential for this whole operation.
Sure, Martin. So with the limited time that we have, I thought it'd be just fun to show and also look at some of the projects that we've done at the gallery that may be interesting. And I was thinking about like what were the common threads that connect many of the important projects that we did at the gallery. And I think like the word that comes to mind a lot is the idea of constraints, and how normally we think as constraints as this limiting thing, but that actually, in our case, constraints helped us to work with our artists and elaborate ideas that were much more experimental in nature and fun to do. So this was sort of like a halfway point of a gallery, 5-6 years in, when we were spaceless for a bit. And so we had space as a constraint that was eliminated. And this is where eventually our gallery would end up being at. And we had a lot of guests over from abroad because there was an art fair or something. And we didn't have a space up yet. So we thought to invite our artists to do a project in the construction side of our space and invite guests to come over. Coincidentally, this is also the artist that we're showing at the booth at the moment. But his name is Maruto Ardi. And we did a hard hat tour of the space before it became a space. And the artist responded to that construction site. While we were building the space, we suddenly got hit with this pandemic thing on the subject of Stella making work during the pandemic. And in the very early part of it, we didn't know what was going to happen in the future. We didn't have COVID tests or antigen tests back then yet, so it was really a risk for us to gather. We were at the point where everyone thought we needed to wear hazmat suits to sort of interact and meet each other. So our gallery space was, what, 40% built? And we had a performative lecture exhibition by this artist duo, Irwan Ahmed and Tita Salina. And everyone had to sign a form to say that we would not be responsible if they got COVID. The artist ended up taking these COVID tests with blood and took a blood sample. And underneath Stella's building sculpture installation, they planted their blood in there before we casted our cement floor. Images of the exhibition. There was also a time during construction where our artists couldn't even travel from one city to another. So this was after that. We had to close down. The construction workers couldn't come to the gallery at all. So we were that time thinking about OVRs. And I don't know if you remember this concept, but they're called online viewing rooms, basically to do presentations of art. And we were doing this presentation for Art Basel Miami Beach or something like that at the time. And our artists found this abandoned shopping mall, K. Imazu and Bagus Pandega. And they did an exhibition there because there weren't any people there. And the rent was almost next to nothing. So another constraint, when we didn't even have the construction site to work with, our artists figured things out, too, I guess. And I guess this is when the space finally came up. The space that you saw for Stella's things and some of the projects that we had in there.
And I think last year, or was it this year, you had a project which I found personally really remarkable because it was called There Is No Center. I don't know if you have prepared to talk about this show a little bit, but because this title, There Is No Center, fits of course very well to what we were talking about before. So maybe you could speak a little bit about the way how this show was built up, what was the idea behind it. That's also in a way how we met, I think, if you want.
Yeah. So early this year, we were reaching organically our 10th year anniversary, and we were sort of just trying to evaluate a little bit like who we are as a gallery and where we want to go. And slowly this idea began to emerge about how those thoughts were being evaluated. And the outcome of that thinking was this exhibition called There Is No Center. This idea that maybe we could make an exhibition with artists who never showed with each other before, who come from very disparate parts of the world, and to have an actual exhibition that would shapeshift as time is progressing through performance-based activities. And I had no idea, but you had actually curated something like that before. But intuitively, when I first met you, I also felt like you stuck to me like a yolk in some way in terms of your form. So the triangulation of how that show came to be was funky because it's related to ACK. And I was going down the metro station and I saw you. I remember a conversation that we had before about soccer and how you're such a big fan of soccer, football. And I wanted you to write a text for our show called There's No Center about your love for football. And that's the triangulation of how things began for that show, a show that was super shapeshifty, and eventually you writing a text for Stella for her show. Shapeshifty, I guess.
Yeah. The exhibition.
Can I ask,
Yeah,
did you
please.
write about the football?
It's very hard for me because it's such a love. I cannot find the right words for it. But my team became now finally champion. I'm a German. My team is Bayer Leverkusen, and we became the German champion, unbeaten in the season 2023-2024. And since then, I'm on a kind of high, actually. So I don't need a second championship. This is just enough for me. So we don't need to have it all. And I know I didn't write, but in one of my other personalities, I once organized the concept for the German Football Museum, but maybe this is a strange place to talk about that. Yeah. But, yeah, I will maybe write it later. But so, doing a gallery in Indonesia, is that also a constraint in a way? Because I think the ecosystem of galleries there is a bit less, you cannot compare it to Europe or to the US or to other parts of, I wouldn't say the global north, but to avoid these terms. But what are the challenges in building up something there? And really maybe asking, because you also represent Ade Darvaman who is part of the collective who was organizing Documenta. So how does it feel to do something in and from Indonesia and also after this time?
So Genja, I've just been thinking about food and eggs now. And to flip the egg, I guess, and look at the egg from the other perspective, that constraints can also be opportunities in disguise, or vice versa. Indonesia is lacking, in many regards, what we regard to be proper art infrastructure, but it also allows for much free range and free jazz interpretations of just doing things. We have limitations, like shipping things to Indonesia is so difficult, And it's always a question mark when things will arrive and how much it costs for things to arrive. But because of that, we then thought, okay, instead of using money for shipping, why don't we start a residency program so artists can work here and interact with communities here? And they end up having really interesting experiences where their practices evolve and change, and they can see things from a different light and perspective, for instance.
I think that's also resonate with Stella's practice in a way, because I think it's really what reminds me is that you said if we are living in the world with multiple suns, whole structure will change. How we interact, the whole framework, structure, everything will change. That kind of thing will really resonate with what you said, right? There are constraints, but once it's flipped, maybe it's opportunity to expand your imagination. And then, yeah, I think I'm just curious that how was your experience in Indonesia, like residency or showing work, how you think about viewers, or you're more comfortable, or there any constraints, or there any chances you could, if you face anything and change into more expansion or practices or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the show that we did, it's probably the only place in the world that I could do that show, if I really think about it. And it's also the first time, it's the biggest scale work I've ever made. And in a way quite hands-off, because I arrived for install, and the work is sort of 50% built. And yeah, I think at first, like what Jun said about the constraint of shipping and stuff, we decided to make something on site. But I always make all of my work by myself. And so it's this is the first time that I really had to let go of a lot of control. And when I arrived and seeing, I don't know how many people were in the team, 20 guys, they're on top of this structure, welding and leveling everything. It was suddenly like, wow, there's no limit of what I can do if I have people to help, and people that are willing to just go for anything. Yeah, I think that's one of the just quite eye-opening for me.
On our end, the show just started also in terms of our conversation with Stella drawing this form within a photograph of our space. Was it a digital drawing that you were making, or a physical?
Yeah, just a pencil drawing.
A pencil drawing?
Yeah.
And it just came like a reverse engineering thing for us then to think about, okay, how do we manifest this object and form into the gallery? Call my architect friends, call technicians and people how do we make this happen? Is this feasible? How do we make sure that it doesn't collapse? How do we realize the surface finishing to really realize the vision of what Stella was wanting to make? Wow.
I think there's something about the energy of Indonesia too, just people really willing to kind of take a chance at anything. The first time I met Barry, the architect. I thought I don't know what I thought we were doing, but he immediately pull out a sketchbook and start sketching, and I was like, okay, looking at June, is that okay that we're doing this? It just never stopped from the very beginning. Yeah, very, very cool to do.
I have one more question to you, Stella, because I just started for Bijutsu Teko a series about writing about artists from Asia, but who are not in Asia anymore. And so I have a bit the question, how does your past as a Chinese American artist, how does Asia hover in your mind? How does it still inform your work? Are there parts of that which still make you making things or making things differently? Or what does that mean to you? Because I just thought about it because you went to Indonesia from New York, but once in your distant past you came from Shenzhen, I guess, to the United States.
I don't know. I mean, I am me, so I'm all of the things I've experienced. But I think maybe what maybe a little, yeah, what I am today, I feel like might be a little bit problematic in the way that I think whenever I go home to Shenzhen, for example, or go to Indonesia, there's something I feel like really kind of discovery-y with my experience. Like I'm always like, oh my God, this thing is amazing, that thing is amazing, how did I not know? I feel like I'm always coming back or coming to lots of places in Asia like a foreigner because I haven't lived here for over 20 years. So it's a lot of kind of rediscovering. But I don't know. I don't really think about it very much.
Since food plays such an important role for
Yeah.
you, probably food.
So I think I'm so Asian. Like it's all about food. No. Yeah.
But that's, I guess, another, if you don't mind me using, quoting, you're echoing this notion of triangulation, how your work seemed to be able to hold these two very different dimensions of something that's very complex, something that in, I think, your previous conversations, for instance, has been drawn parallels to with regards to quantum physics, for instance, how things, quarks, subatomic particles work, how you maybe hide things and place things in like tiny scales, medium scales, super large scales, and our relationship to that, but also at the same time be related to something so simple, like rice balls. Like there's this work of Stella's.
I mean, we all had onigiri, we just realized today, right?
Indeed. But Stella also made this onigiri of sorts in the show. In front of one of her sculptures, there's this deceptively simple ball that was actually very complex to make because they contain within this form of a sphere, I'm bad with math, but hundreds of these little sculptures that contain thereafter magnets inside of them that then contain this invisible energy that again is simple as they're magnetized, but at the same time, what that represents. Could you please elaborate from there?
No, sorry, I spaced out a little bit. But to return to like your question about how I look at my like life trajectory, I think it's also something that I want to think about in relation to like the question of identity and representation, that in relation to what I've been talking about with multiple suns and multiple centers, which is multiple origins, that I'm not quite interested in thinking about me coming from one place, because I think I don't. And in the larger scheme of time and scale, none of us come from one place, right? We're all from many, many places into one. And I have, parts of me that remember other things than Shenzhen also. So I think, not that I'm, trying to not touch on that, but I think I look at it in a very organic and zigzagging way, maybe.
Yeah, maybe as you realize in our public program, we tried also to keep these identity discussions a little bit out. We were instead rather looking at something you could describe with maybe universalism from below or something like that, because identity is a little bit overused recently, and if we look back into art history, something like abstraction can also be considered as a common ground. And in that sense, I like your slightly the attitude of not going too deep into it and not becoming too anecdotal, to instead rather focus on what's in the work and what's there and what the work offers us. So this is for me totally understandable, because yeah, social media and so on, everything always looks for these narratives and for ressentiment and for creating feeling of ressentiment and to create energy maybe out of the wrong corner. I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know, this is my feeling as slightly younger generation. I don't know, like, look at the world.
Okay, I'm a white male, okay.
No, just saying, like, look at the world, and sometimes it's really difficult to find a specific single house, a home to go, right? That kind of feeling, because of this, like, a huge migration going on, that is becoming like a common base, what we experience, then it's really difficult to talk everything about singularity, as you said, like a single sun and then multiple suns, right? So it's, I don't know, like Stella's work is more like, quite, how to say, like, I really can resonate in a way because of the strategical avoidance of the singularity, like a single perspective,
Very well
or like
said.
a single site. And then it's something rediscovery, but also is like a spirit this contemporary era has in a way, right? So that feels really like natural to me. That kind of perspective is maybe become a common in near future. This kind of perspective rather than singular, like a canon or something. Yeah.
Yeah, which fits to there's no center, of course, in a different way. But Jun, thinking about the future of your gallery, so what are projects you really, really urgently would like to realize?
Oh, well,
In thinking about singularities and not.
sure. Well, during There Is No Center, we got a chance to invite you over to Indonesia, and for us to watch this video piece by this experimental Iranian video artist called Raha Raisnia. And she was doing this analog manipulation of film for an audience that came to the gallery. And we took away their phones.
For 1.5 hours.
For 1.5 hours to watch and hear and observe this really incredible work, actually. And we had a question and answer session after the screening. And one of the audience members was asking you and the artist, or making a comment that this is boring. And I think that statement, it offended a little bit the artist, but it also got us to think a little bit about the context of boredom today and how it's actually multifaceted. It's not so single entendre, maybe. So one project I'm looking forward to is our boring show. We're thinking to make a show next year called The Boring Show.
Yeah, so you're all invited to Indonesia to join the opening of the Boring Show. We don't know when the dates will be announced, but it should be very soon. Because we think boredom is also a universal quality, and it's something which is important to enjoy boredom. It's not just something very negative. But I think it's a good timing to open up this discussion in case someone from the audience has a question or any comment on what was spoken here through, unless you have another question to the participants.
I want to hear audience voices. I want to hear audience voices first.
Okay. Carla? No audience? But then it's okay, I think.
Yeah.
Then we leave you and wish you a good time on the fair, and we thank for your attention, and we hope that you will have the time to enjoy a little bit of the public program, and also, of course, the great, amazing gallery booths. And I have to say I'm super happy and honored to make this here in Kyoto, because I think this idea of art collaborations of Japanese galleries inviting international galleries is super unique in the world, and that galleries which are not necessarily the most altruistic entities, that they are somehow forced to share. This is something absolutely wonderful, and I think that the world is also looking a little bit on not the world, but I think people really look on what's going on here in Kyoto, and so I think we can be happy to be part of this, because it's something which is probably needed. Very simple. Okay, thanks to all of you guys for coming. Thanks, Jun, for flying over.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stella. Thank you.
では改めまして登壇者の皆様ありがとうございました。
Okay, once again, thank you very much for the panelists. The ACK talks will continue tomorrow and day after tomorrow. We have a lot more themes to talk about. And also, this talk is going to be available online as well. So please continue to enjoy the ACK talks. Once again, thank you very much.